So one of the metaphors that I use a lot in my forums, those of you who've been coming a lot are getting familiar with this, particularly in the catechumenate, is what I call the hourglass of covenants. So this past 3 weeks, we've been going through the hourglass of covenants in our Old Testament scriptures. We start out with the covenant with Noah, which is for all of humanity, which is, basic, be decent to one another. Don't drink the blood of animals because it is the source of life, and I will never flood the earth again. And I put the rainbow in the sky to remind me of that, says God. Then we get to Abraham, who God says, leave your home, leave your father's idol-making house, and follow me into the wilderness, and I will make you the father of many nations, so many that you can't even count them. And then we get even further into the covenant with Moses, with Torah on the mountaintop, which is mostly considered summed up in the Ten Commandments. I love the image out of History of the World Part 1 when Moses comes down, behold the 15, and he drops one. 10 Commandments. 10 is a nice round number. It works. So we're going from universal to general to more specific to a people group. Now, later on down the road, we go to David, which is the monarchy, and then back out with Jesus in the Eucharist. But let's stop here with the Ten Commandments. I don't know if it was the case out here, but there was a lot of hand-wringing and a lot of divisive arguments about whether or not to leave the Ten Commandments up on the walls of courthouses or to take them down. Some thought that it was inappropriate with the separation of church and state. Others thought that it was a sign of the righteousness of God's law and the cultural Christianity that was important to the community. I'm not here to debate that today, but what I want to go and think about is, why would the Ten Commandments be so important to people that they would want to keep them on the wall? And if they're so important, what is it that they say? What is it that they teach us? So let's dive in today and let's look at the commandments together and kind of see what they're saying. So the first commandment is, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. Now, contrary to popular belief, monotheism, the idea that there is only one God, was not a real popular concept in most of scriptural times. What this is introducing to us is a concept called henotheism, which is there are many gods, but this is our God. Or, if you want to use playground language, my God can beat up your God, as opposed to my dad can beat up your dad. But what is being pointed to in this passage, in this particular commandment, is, hey y'all, there may be plenty of gods, but I'm the one who came and rescued you. I'm the one who took you out of slavery, out of oppression, through the Red Sea, protected you from Pharaoh, destroyed his armies, and am leading you to the land of promise. Stick with me. Focus on me. I am your God and you are my people. So it's helping us understand the importance of our relationship to God. Commandment number 2. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Don't bow down to them, because I really don't have a lot of patience for that. Now, a lot of arguments have happened about what constitutes an idol, particularly in the Puritan end of the Protestant Reformation in regard to the Catholic Church. But in this time and place, what God is asking of the people is, don't worship the signposts. Worship me. Think about ultimacy. What's the ultimate good? What's the most important thing? Any image, if you think that the idol is God, you have missed the point. The idol is a representation at best, and at worst, a misstep when it comes to trying to find where God truly is. There are many different ways of understanding what an idol is, whether it be a statue, whether it be an icon, whether it be something that is more important to you than God, or even holding up something that points to God higher than your actual relationship to God. Even if we take the Bible or the liturgy or the church as more important than God, we are idolizing those things in a way that keeps us from connection with God ultimately. Do we find God through those things? Of course. They are, after all, signposts and paths. But God is the journey, the destination, the journey, and the creator of all those things therein. So there's plenty of other things that we can focus on, but unless God is our prime directive, we're being distracted. Number 3, you shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for God will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Now raise your hand if, like me, you grew up thinking that meant don't say, oh my God. Yeah. So it's good to be mindful of not flippantly using God's name. And the actual meaning behind this passage is, do not swear falsely by God's name, and do not call upon God to do things that are unrighteous. So if you swear to God that you're going to do something and you don't do it, that is what this is addressing. Or by God, I hope you are smote to the ground because you disagree with me over something. That's misusing God's name. So it's a matter of respecting and honoring God's name, the righteousness of God, and our relationship with God and each other. Don't worry, we're getting somewhere with all this. Number 4, remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And not just you, but everyone in your household. This is about taking care of ourselves. Now, I know that it's really hard to get restorative sleep and restorative rejuvenation in times of great busyness with work, when you have a lot of responsibilities in your life, when stress is constant. But the importance of taking the discipline to try to have one day a week, just one, where you choose to put down anything that's work-related so that you can rest, recharge, get some sleep, do things that need to be done to revive your soul. Anything from go out in nature, take a bath, take a walk, sleep till noon if you need to, or at least, remind the people in your life that it's important to slow down and take a break. Number 5, honor your father and mother so that your days may be long in the land. Now, this doesn't just mean honor your father and mother on pain of your life, much as my father would joke about that sort of thing when I was a kid. But what it means ultimately is respect the authorities that you have in your life, especially your parents. Now, conversely, this also means parents and authority figures earn the honor of your children and those underneath you. It is vitally important that we who are underneath our parents or authorities remember that these structures are in place so that we can have the best possible life we have together. And sometimes, if those who are authorities are being unjust, it is important that we call them out so that we can begin to build better dynamics for how to live together. One example of this was the way that Jesus rather forcefully imposed his own criticism of how things were structured in the temple. Now, does that mean, kids, you get to rebel against your parents just because they don't allow you to do something you want to do? No. But if people are being horrible to you, if people are being unjust, that's a different story altogether. That being said, it requires mutual respect. God does not want us to have authoritarianism. God wants us to have structures where authorities have earned the right to have that authority or live into the authority they're given, and those of us who are underneath it need to respect and honor that, even if we disagree with it. It's a tricky balance, but it's really important to have. Number 6, pretty straightforward. Don't kill people. Now, I'm pretty sure none of you I have to worry about doing this right now. Even if we've been locked in with our spouses and family for a long time. But I'm pretty sure we're not going to do that. But most importantly, respect the dignity of every human being. Murder is not okay. It just isn't. Then you shall not commit adultery. Hey, stay faithful to the commitments you make. Just like we have covenants with God, we have covenants with those that we commit our lives to in marriage. Now, I like the concept that Jesus and the Pharisees did of putting a hedge around the law. But instead of just trying to like make sure you don't break the legalistic doers or don'ts, I would say not just don't, be unfaithful to your spouses, but really work hard on the relationships you have so that as you hit snags, as you hit challenges, we are much more committed to the relationships we're building than worrying about whether or not we're crossing boundaries on the edge. If you're to that point, then it's probably a symptom of a greater problem within the relationship itself. The constant working on how we live together, who we are together, is vital to this. You shall not steal. Respect the property of those of people that are around you. Respect your neighbors. Don't take things that don't belong to you. On the other hand, don't keep things from people when you don't need them if they do need them. Theft is when you take something that doesn't rightfully belong to you because you want it for yourself. It's either out of greed or out of survival. In both cases, injustice is there. If we are in a time where people are stealing for survival, then we need to think about what sort of theft is happening that keeps them from having their survival. That being said, theft is still not a good way of living, and we need to make sure that we remember to respect the life, the dignity, and the property of those around us. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. Don't lie. Pretty straightforward. Truth is essential to who we are. Integrity, caring for one another, and not lying against people, especially in a court of law, especially when it comes to opponents or people with whom we disagree. Lying is not okay. That's especially important for those who have power over us not to lie against us. Or if we are trying to hold people to justice, that integrity and truth always be in play. And last but not least, don't covet. This basically is an extension of number 8. If it isn't yours, don't want it. Coveting becomes either a source of resentment or greed. But at the same time, if we can share the things that are appropriate to share and respect those things that are not appropriate to share, we can have a better system in society. Now, we've gone through the 10 Commandments. I don't know if you've had anyone go through those in that sort of depth in a while, but I felt like it was worth looking into. If you were to sum all 10 of these commandments up in one commandment to get the gist of it, what would it be? Anne?
Love God, love your neighbor, love yourself.
And why is that?
Is the new commandment.
Mm-hmm. Except that it's not a new commandment because it's actually in Torah, but it's a summation of those things.
I would say responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Who are the people that? What are the relationships that the 10 Commandments are addressing here?
All relationships.
Mm-hmm. To God, to your neighbor, and to ourselves. Is that what you're going to say, Lynn?
I was going to say always act out of your highest good.
Mm-hmm. And Elizabeth?
Take responsibility of yourself.
Mm-hmm. I'm hearing a lot of Jesus' teachings in this. Focus on your motives. Start with yourself. Seek your highest good. Focus on the relationships. It all is summed up in love God, your neighbor, and yourself because it's all about the relationships that you have. So Jesus, as much as, Giancarlo, you're correct, in John's gospel, it's considered a new commandment. But it's a summation of the 613 commandments of Torah, or the 10 commandments in this case. So what if the emphasis on having the 10 commandments on courtroom walls was to remind us of the greatest commandment? What if instead of focusing on a cultural norm or a religious identity or eschewing superstition, the emphasis of the 10 commandments in our law code was how do we best love and care for one another? Cornel West is quoted saying, "Justice is what love looks like in public." We are required to think in our highest levels. So if we were to have a society that says don't covet, we would have less greed. If we were in a society that says don't murder, we would be a lot less tolerant of violent crimes, both committed by civilians and by police and by military. If we had a society that said let's focus on our relationships, we would have less broken relationships. We would have less anger and hostility. If we had a society that prioritized resting, we would have less workaholism. We would have less burnout. We would have less addiction. We would have a lot healthier society. If we remembered that the ultimacy of God, not the signposts that point us to that direction, we would not have idolizing the Bible. We would not have demonizing religion and spirituality. We would have a society that is prioritized on how do I love you? How do I care about you? How do I hear your story when it doesn't make sense to me? How do I allow room for viewpoints that I don't agree with if it means that we are able to live in a better life together? And ultimately, if God is the source of all of this, when do I remember to allow myself to be part of God's creation, not the centerpiece? The Ten Commandments are a really powerful collection, and I don't like all aspects of it. But what it points to is something that I think we as a nation, but more importantly, we as a church, need to recommit ourselves to, not for the sake of going back to the idealized 1950s like a lot of churches want to teach, but to stretch beyond what all of those things look like to the timelessness of God's love, where love of God, love of neighbor, and love of self, which you hear me say pretty much every sermon, is our highest goal, but we can contextualize it in the way that the Ten Commandments contextualized it in their ancient times. So may we, as we continue to explore these covenants when we get to ours at the end of Lent, continue to think about what each one, the different angles from this gem that God is showing us in these covenants of what loving relationship with God, each other, and ourselves looks like. And may we remember to think of it, of all things that are based on our religion, our culture, and our society, through the lens of how does this and does this help me love? Amen.